see Mr. Arguello, Mr. Melendez? Because I've got 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
What would you good, Tanya? We have a quorum. We'll go ahead and call the workshop for transportation to order for Tuesday, August 19th. We have transportation update. Mr. Creech, I believe I'll turn it over to you, correct?
Good afternoon, Dr. Pace, board members. Thank you very much for this opportunity to come out this afternoon and participate in this workshop. We've been excitedly looking forward to it and anxious to go forward with some of the issues and discuss some of the major issues that are plaguing the transportation division right now. At the table, please let me introduce on the far end, Mr. Randy Wheeler. He is our business coordinator. Next to him is Adriana Fracasso. She's our brand new operations coordinator. I think everybody knows Mr. Shatera. All right, we're going to do a very short PowerPoint for you, and then we can get into discussions and talk and entertain questions. So first up, district data. Just a few things I'd like to share with you is that total transportation services personnel, we are allocated for 532 positions at this point. Our budget runs about $21 million a year, and I guess I have to click on it. There you go. Runs about $21 million a year, and that's broken down for you. Salaries are about $12.3 million, benefits about $5.3 million. Our fuel, believe it or not, we spend $1.6 million burning out those tailpipes. So did you know 238 daily route buses? There's 423 buses in the yellow fleet, and we transport about 23,000 students daily. We're the 15th largest bus fleet in the entire state of Florida and the 69th largest in the nation. We do about 6 million annual miles. That's something like 29 trips to the moon or something like that back. So it's a long way we drive every year. And we run almost 1 million gallons of diesel. The state mandated student transportation criteria is very strict. Students have to live at least 2 miles from the school to be eligible, unless you have an IEP with related service. And the bus stop must be placed within 1.5 miles of the of the student's home, which is interesting to me because it's a 2-mile transportation zone, but it's 1.5 miles for the bus stop. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? But that's the way the law works. We also account for students that are subject to hazardous walking criteria, and that's defined by one of our state statutes. And so we can get funding for students that might have a hazardous walk to school if they live less than 2 miles. We also, of course, accommodate all of our special needs students, and we accommodate 504 students. We are the most highly regulated transportation industry out there. Florida statutes define the fact that district school boards have to use yellow buses as a part of all regular transportation to school. There are some caveats to that, and there's 5 different caveats. And one is, of course, if it's a part of, and we're going to talk about later in the presentation, a public transit system. And there are 4 other caveats to that. But the school buses themselves must meet 37 different federal motor vehicle standards. That's more than any other vehicle out there in the entire nation and on the road anywhere. We're the most stringently regulated vehicle. All of our buses have to pass a 178-point inspection every 30 school days, which that works out to about every 6 weeks or so. And then all of those inspections and repairs must be done by state-certified mechanical technicians. And if any one of those items fail, we have to take the bus out of service immediately. Some of our expenses, annual miles, we do about 15,853 per bus. The cost per route is almost $60,000 annually. The cost for fuel alone is $4,100. We are currently regulated, and we've cost appropriated about 3.82 cents a mile. Our state reimbursement is a pitiful $399 per student, when we're spending $927 on average. Some of the things that affect our efficiencies are the geography and topography of the areas that we serve, and certainly the demographics of the areas that we serve. It also has a lot to do with the types of programs that we serve. Countywide schools are certainly going to be a lot more expensive than neighborhood schools. The school tier sequence and bill schedule is critically important. About 3 years ago, I came before at least one member of this board, and we talked about bringing our schools into a 3-tier system that were regulated with bell times. We did that, and we were very successful in taking some buses off the road because of that. The route planning system and the technology level that we operate also affects our efficiency. The higher the routing system technology and the better our routers are at what they do, then the more efficient that we can become. Routing is not as much a science as it is a craft. It takes both. The machine will tell you what it thinks you need to do, but someone actually has to look at that route and manually manipulate that route. The age of the fleet is a really big part of that as well, and I'll learn to push this button in a second. Because obviously the older the bus, the more it breaks down, the less reliable it is, and it's going to be less fuel efficient. So age of the fleet is a major portion of that. There are limitations on student ride times that are recommendations through the state. One of them is 55 minutes. Where practicable, we always try to adhere to that as much as we possibly can, but there are some cases when you drive an auto way to Yeehaw Junction and back, it just isn't going to happen. I'm sorry, but we do the very best we can with that. Wages and benefits and labor contracts also affect our efficiencies, as do unfunded mandates like the McKinney-Vento. If we look at the efficiencies, I came on board in 2018, and starting in 2018, we have systematically reduced the number of buses that are required to get our 23,000 students to school every day. From 2018 to 2019, we reduced it by 25. That was the tiers that we reduced and the promise that we made. And then in the COVID years, we found out that we could reduce another 30 routes. And then most recently, we've taken off another 6 for a total of 61 routes that have been reduced. That's a cost avoidance to the district of $3.6 million, and we're very, very proud of that. We have a very dedicated team of fleet professionals. We have 24 total fleet services personnel. There are 20 fleet mechanical services personnel, and 2 of them are ASC certified. And we encourage all of our mechanical technicians to get their certifications. Some more district fleet data. There are 4 repair facilities. The primary one is Simpson Road. It also houses the White Fleet Repair Facility. We have a pseudo repair facility set up at Horizon and a very, very small shop that we have over at St. Cloud. We're currently running about 8.25 years in age of the bus fleet, and the oldest bus in the fleet is still 17 years old. I don't know who drives a car that's 17 years old, but we got some. Oh yes, sir, we got some out there. Our bus.
His car is young compared to him, though.
Just got it.
Our bus mechanic to ratio, bus to mechanic ratio is 22 to 1. The state industry, the industry sweet spot is 21 to 1. So right where we need to be. We have about 330 white fleet vehicles. The average age is about 12.4 years, and the oldest is more than 30 years. And Mr. Shakira is working on making a difference for us on that. We have 4 fuel sites. There's 8 fuel tanks out there. Diesel capacity is about 77,000 gallons, and gasoline capacity is about 40,000. The reason we have so much diesel on hand, even though we're getting diesel loads about twice a week, is because if we had to go into a reserve situation with a hurricane, we have about 23.6 school days that we could still service schools with the diesel on hand at the sites. That doesn't include the fact that we keep the tanks topped off in every one of those buses. So that would also extend our range on that. We burn about 3,200 gallons a day doing those 15,000 miles that we talked about. State of the fleet. So in transportation, this is just a small breakdown for you to talk about the 411 buses that we have. One of the big things I want you to notice is that there's a small area between 2013 and about 2015 where we didn't buy very many buses. And that's starting to tell on us because the 2007 and 2008s are really maintenance hogs. If we can get rid of those year groups of buses, we'll save almost $1 million over the next 5 years. And we're working closely with the superintendent and with Sarah to make sure that we have enough capital available so that we can replace those buses on a systematic schedule so that we can again have a cost avoidance. 2009 was the very first year that we bought regular education AC equipped school buses here. Prior to that, only ESC buses had air conditioning. So we've literally got 129 buses running around out there, which is 31%. That's not air conditioning. And we hear about it every day. But with our replacement plan, we're on schedule to make sure that we're going to have those kids in air-conditioned buses ASAP. So over the next year, as a matter of fact. Again, the age of the fleet's about 8.25 years. If we go to the next page, I'll go back one. This is what our plan is for the next 5 years. So over the next 5 years, our plan is to continue to young up the fleet, if you will. Our purchase this year was 55 buses. Those are 23-year groups. And we bought 55 of those, and I'm very, very confident that next year we'll be able to buy another 50. That would do several things. One, it's going to bring the age of the fleet into the range that by the time we get into 2027, we'll be at 6.05 years age, which is 7 years is about where you need to be in the industry. And it puts 52.6% of our fleet under warranty. The industry standard is 50%. You want about 50% of your fleet under warranty and about 50% aging out, if you will. So we're very proud of that. We're proud of the opportunity. We're proud to support the superintendent and the and financial services have been able to provide for us.
Is the fuel efficiency getting better with the newer models, or there hasn't been a
Absolutely, sir, thank you
significant
for
change in
asking.
that?
Absolutely. So those 08s and 09 model years, you're talking 4 or 5 miles per gallon. Our newest buses, which are Thomas builds that we're buying, with the new Cummins engines, are getting 9+ gallons per mile. That's incredible. Plus, if you look at that bus, it's more aerodynamically shaped. It's rounder. It's got low skirt panels on the side, which reduces that low pressure areas along the side. So that bus zipping down the road, not too fast, it's speeding. But that bus actually is very, very efficient for what it does, versus some of the older buses, which are flat noses, and they just push that air, and that burns a lot of extra diesel. So not only are we going to young fleet get that air conditioning in there, but it also increases our efficiency and we reduce our diesel burn. So, good, thank you, sir. So let's talk about our peer districts. In total transportation operating expenditures, Osceola is 40th lowest out of 67 districts in the state. What that means is there are 27 districts that are doing it less expensive than we are. But those are typically smaller districts, smaller geographically speaking, fewer buses, and they actually put more students on the buses. So those are typically Panhandle, Franklin's, Gadsden's, Hamilton's, those kind of counties. At 1,327 square miles, Osceola is the 6th largest in the entire state. Oops. We're the 6th largest in the entire state, but yet our expenditures as a portion of the total district expenditures is only 4.27%. The state average is 4.13%. So we're doing a really good job as far as I'm concerned. And we're going to get better? Absolutely. We're going to shoot for that state average or below. But right now, we're in a good place. With an average of 69 students per bus in Osceola, we rank 19 highest in the state for average student bus occupancy. And what that means is there's only 18 other districts that put more kids on a bus than we do, and therefore get slightly more funding through the state funding formula, because you get more funding from the state based on the number of students that you put on that school bus. Many people don't realize that, but we have an average load of 55. Many districts max them out. If the bus is 77 passenger, they'll put 77 kids on it. I feel like at middle school level and high school especially, they're my size, only 2 fit per seat. That's a 49-inch seat, and I don't want to put 3 kids on there unless I absolutely have to. Our most significant challenge, we're hiring, folks. Needless to say, we have got to do something about getting bus drivers, but it's not just us, it's state, it's national. Even in Europe, there's issues with what they call lorry drivers over there. But everybody's scrambling for bus drivers or truck drivers or CDL licensed drivers. It really doesn't matter where you look. There's just this huge shortage right now. But we're doing everything we can. So you've got to remember that shortages are oftentimes tied to the national economy. When the economy's good, we don't do so good. But when the economy's bad, we're an easy place to get a job, so people line up.
Mr. Page?
Yes,
I
yes.
think Ms. Castillo has.
Actually, it's better to listen, because my question was regarding what, in your expert opinion, the challenge is. Just because it's not an issue with education specifically, but every transportation industry leader is suffering
Yes, ma'am.
when it comes to hiring. That's also not just transportation, though. I mean, it's other industries as well. So you're attributing that to the fact that our economy is doing well. So people who would typically be in those jobs are opting for positions that pay a higher rate. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, and I've said that based on the fact that prior to the COVID pandemic, that's the thing that Transportation Division saw, was it really was it would sway with the economy. So, excuse me, like in 2008, 2009, the down years, we had tons of bus drivers. But then when the economy started picking back up, of course, people went to higher paying jobs and left the industry. So again, that's all prior to COVID. Right now, we're not really sure what the issues are. There are plenty of jobs available, and we're just not seeing people come out.
So, and forgive me if you're gonna answer this at a later time. I see that we're gonna talk about recruiting in just a bit. When we are recruiting, we have people come out. Are we asking people, first of all, my first question is, it looks like turnout is not very high when we're doing recruiting. So that's the first issue. We don't have a lot of people to pick from. Second situation, and tell me if this is correct, are we making offers and not getting those offers accepted at a decent rate?
So the offers are being made based
Yeah.
on their availability and based on the fact that they are actually vetted through the entire system. The next one actually is the stringent licensing restrictions, and there's a lot of things that go along with this, but we will make offers many times, and they'll turn us down, they'll say, no, I found this
Right.
out someplace else.
That's my question.
Yes, ma'am. And the other, unfortunately, the other thing that we see, and I just saw one this morning, we have a person come in and say, I want to be a bus driver, I love kids, went through the whole training, went out this morning, drove the run, came back in and resigned.
Because it was too much, like they didn't expect
doesn't like
the
kids.
job.
They wanted a CDL.
Oh,
A
right.
CDL
Yeah.
costs between $3,000 and $5,000 privately to get.
Mhm.
So school districts are known as CDL mills, so to speak, in some cases, which is terrible.
Right.
So they'll come in, do the pretend thing for a couple of weeks, get that license, and out the door they go.
Is there anything that we can do to reduce that number of people who are coming in and getting a license from taxpayer money, essentially?
One of the things that we try to do is heavily vet those individuals, and really we talk to them during the interview process, and we try to get a feel for, is this person sincere, is this person just here, again, to go through the motions, and sometimes you can tell and sometimes you can't. I do know from experience, I spent 11 years as the operations director in Orange County, and actually Mr. Kruppenbacher was our attorney at that time. And we talked about then having them sign a contract.
Yeah.
But those we found out really aren't enforceable, and about the only thing you can do is if you owe them money, if they leave, you can take that money. But other than that, chasing those people, for that small amount really
May I
wasn't.
ask, what is the cost of getting the CDL license? What does that entail
So for the individual or for the,
for us?
okay, for us, it's really just the time for our staff. I did an analysis, not in this district, but a different district that I worked in, and it came out to about $600 between the staff's time, the fuel, and the time on the bus, because we accounted for each and every one of the minutes on the bus and the staff and what their average salary were. So we did a complete business breakdown. Somewhere between $600 and $700. Again, that's a great deal for a person who's just here to get a license and move on.
So essentially, we have folks within our transportation department that are, I guess, for lack of a better word, certified to certify other people
Absolutely,
to get their
yes, ma'am.
license. So it's really sunk cost at this point. We're not putting in any more money or
No.
effort to provide these folks with a CDL license. It's just taking those classes and pass. Is there a test that they have to
Oh,
pass?
yes, ma'am. It requires 40 hours of classroom training. 20 hours has to be with the trainer. There has to be 10 hours on the bus behind the wheel. There has to be nighttime driving. There's an entire array of things that they have to go through. But the fact of the matter is that there's a cost to them for the license, but we pick up the cost for everything else. So it really costs the candidate nothing, and we pay them for the training when they've completed and they passed and they become the employee. So that's all in retro pay. But the cost to us, again, we have 5 trainers. 2 of them are CDL certified third-party testers, and what that means is they're just like the driver's license bureau or the tax collector.
Yeah.
We issue a license. We
Right.
send them down there to get their picture made and have the laminated license done, but if we had the machine, we could do it because they're certified by the state to do that. The state comes in and audits us periodically to ensure that we're following and we're totally compliant, right down to the fact that they measure the skills course that we have the bus drive on, down to the 1/32nd of an inch, the paint. That skills course has to be right to, as my grandma used to say, the gnat's behind.
Yeah.
It's got to be right there. And they're very, very stringent on that and very, very strict. So those 2 individuals are incredible. They were trainers before, but they are actually on contract with the state through us as an agent, a sponsoring agent at the school district. And that's how we get our business done.
So I do have another question, and forgive me if this is completely out of field, but I'm just trying to figure out how to minimize people using our school district to get their licenses and go drive for someone else. Is there a way for someone to have a provisional license of some sort without actually getting the certified license with, you know what I mean? So that we can ask them to be here a certain amount of time before actually getting the certification?
So in about 2000, it was approximately 2009, roughly 2010, the Florida Association of Pupil Transportation, which is a member group of all 67 districts, and I've been the past president, chair, and past president of the organization. We went to the state and we said, we've got to do something that's beyond passenger endorsement, air brake endorsement, CDL, because that at the time was all you needed to do to drive a school bus. That's all any truck driver needs, except unless you're an articulated truck driver, which is the big semis, you have to have a Class A with articulation. So we said, we've got to do something special. Help us. We need some sort of provisional license. What we had asked for was, we need a school bus driver's license only. That's it.
Yeah.
If you get this license, we train you, you can only drive a school bus with this license. You can't go to FedEx and UPS, you can't go anywhere else with this license, it won't work. So they came out with this thing called the S endorsement. All that means is that you've been through the school bus driver state certified training curriculum. It didn't help us at all. So today, what do you have to drive a school bus? A passenger endorsement, an air brake endorsement, and an S endorsement for school buses. But it doesn't keep you from taking that license and
Doesn't
using
really
it at
solve
FedEx
the
or anywhere else.
problem.
So they didn't help us. They didn't, either they didn't understand what we were asking for, which was tough because we went through many, many committee meetings with them, or they just decided to take a different route. So, not sure.
Understood,
I hope
thank
that
you.
answered your question. I'm sorry. Ed.
Yes,
Okay.
no, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
So just a quick comment, and then Mr. Melendez has a question.
Yes,
I get the problem with this, people coming in, I also get, you gotta be careful too, you don't want somebody stuck in there that really doesn't want to do it.
absolutely.
We don't want people driving our buses and our kids who hate it, and they feel like they've gotta do 30 days to get, pay off their, so they fall into both groups.
Yes.
I tried it, I don't like it, or I tried it and I got one on them.
And that's what they do, unfortunately. And again, it's $3,000 to $5,000 on their own if they go out and get that thing. So, yes, sir.
Mr. Melendez?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's, when I was on the SRO Task Force Committee, they also talked about being short law enforcement officers.
Mhm.
So they actually have a formalized contract where they can hire cadets ahead of time, and they give them like a 2-year contract to work with them. So they can't work for another agencies, because a lot of times that happens too. Like the Osceola Sheriff may only pay $20 an hour, but then Orange County pays 22, so they go through the academy, sponsor, then leave. So they put some kind of provision in there. And I spoke with Frank right now and said, well, maybe we can look at revising more modified contract language to do something like that and say, okay, if we pay for your license, this and that, it's a 2-year commitment, you know what I mean? Just like any other employment, you know? And then, so I think that if we can kind of not recreate the wheel, but look at somebody else's wheel. Because maybe within the transportation contracts, that doesn't make sense, but if we look at other agencies that have done similar type contracts, then, because then we can look at the true cost too.
Sure.
Like you said, if they do leave early for some reason, then they have to pay us back.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then we could come up with maybe some predefined charge ahead of time that's justified. Because like you said, if a school costs X number of dollars, well, then that should be, not just our costs are 600, but we should try to put in that contract the amount of money it would cost them to get the license on the outside. So if they did leave early, they reimburse us back for that, and we can take that money then and probably recruit somebody else if
We'll
they
get
do leave.
together. Members of the board, this is only gonna get worse. I called the airport today to find out if they had drivers that we could use, et cetera, and they advised that they were paying $16.50. They just got approved to go to 18 because they're down 50 drivers. And the shuttle drivers don't qualify because they're not CDL.
Not CDL.
You'd have to put them through the training.
Right.
But everybody's going into the thing of where do we find drivers?
Right.
I have a call into Mears right now to see if Paul can tell us, is there anything they can do to help or how they deal with it? But we're competing for dollars now.
Yes, we are. And
I
I'd
guess-
certainly be open to any type of contract. The one thing that I might add is that there are drivers who come to us and drive for a year, and life changes or something. And sometimes when you look at the specter of a heavy contract, that might scare people away that otherwise would come and say, well, I've got the freedom to leave anytime I want. So there might be another edge to that sword that we'd have to look at and consider before we entered into some sort of a contract. But
Well,
anything that could
it's
be-
only the contract for the people who don't have the license.
Yes, sir.
If you get the license on your own, you come in, that's a whole new game, you paid for it on your own, because they could have done that with anybody else, but
Right.
nobody else is doing it but us.
Yes.
So that part doesn't fear me, as far as leverage against us, because again, like if I wanted to do something, I get the license on my own, then there's no contract at all. So the contract only exists if they have 0 license,
Right.
and we're providing that license
We
while
get
the
it
training
in front.
for
I
them.
got a new idea. We'll
Yes,
get
sir.
together.
Right.
Just listen to.
Okay, we've got a bunch of other questions. Mr. Arguello? then
I
Mr.
reserve the rest of
Castillo.
my questions for the end of the
I'm sorry.
But that one's just specific to that. The rest, I want to hear the rest of the presentation.
Mr. Arguello, then Ms. Castillo, and then Mr. Bass.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a whole bunch of problems, right? Number one, we're the lowest paying. We have the most amount of responsibility in terms of having everyone's kids on board.
Yes.
It's like a nightmare to find employees in that situation.
Absolutely.
But one, along the lines of, Board Member Castillo, maybe a delayed licensure would help. If you could delay someone's licensure for, let's say 365 days, then you gotta drive in order to get your licensure, right? That's obviously, there's gonna be some legal issues there. And bad legal issues is exactly why you get an S endorsement, right? And it didn't help, because now you have an S endorsement, it means nothing. When it should have been, you can't drive a school bus unless you have an S, right? Like, the S is the only one. So, like, sloppy policy ends up with sloppy results.
Yes, sir.
It says, but what about paying, what is the impact on our budget just to pay people competitively, like what Frank was saying? Because in the end, that's really gonna be the only thing that would motivate someone to fill your seats.
I can tell you that, again, I stay in contact with all the directors in the area, directors across the state, and I've actually got emails that came in this morning. I sent out a Survey Monkey just to gather some more information on what they're doing and what they're seeing. Depending on the district, some districts are paying as high as $16, $17 an hour. Santa Rosa came in this morning and said they're paying $18.99, $18.98, but they're privatized. Duval is also much higher, but again, they're privatized. But everybody's in that $14, $15, $16 range right now. Again, the larger districts that have the millage that can afford that. So for us, I also know that next door in Orange, we're competitive. We're within about $1 of each other. They're offering $1,000 sign-on, $500 when you complete the class and get your CDL, and $500 at the end of the year. And my director friend up there is telling me, RB, I'm just not seeing them walk in the door.
Right.
They're down about 110.
That's not enough, right? So even what the local districts are doing
Right.
is not good enough, right? So I would like completely get out of the frame of mind that we need to be competitive with other people who are also losing the same game,
Right.
Yeah.
right? And we need to be competitive with people who are actually doing well, as opposed to
Yes, sir.
everybody else is failing at the same task,
So I
right?
have two theories on that. One is I think that the industry as a whole has been shortchanged over the last 30 years. I got in this business in 1992, 93. And I can tell you then that the proportionate share of money comes from the state as compared to the local effort, the local district millage, is about the same. It has gone up with the cost of living, but we've never gotten ahead. So I was on a team view the other day listening to an economist out of Georgia talking about the same thing going on in Georgia. And he made a very, very good point in that bus driving as an industry has been overlooked for so long. We're so far behind that it's going to take a huge effort to move it forward and get our drivers to the point that they are, number one, recognized professionally, and number two, are paid to do that they should. And in the presentation, of course, we will talk later about the low pay and the long hours. If you think about it, we guarantee 6 hours a day for a bus driver. They get up, they're at work before 6:30, typically they're up around 4:30, they come in at 5:30. They drive until about 9 o'clock, they're off from 9 to about 1:30, then they get back on the bus and drive till 6:30. They put in almost 13 hours, and in some cases only got paid 6 hours for it.
Yeah.
They've been awake their whole day. They have spent their whole waking hours with only 6 hours in some cases. Bus driving in my opinion, has not evolved to keep up with the world at large. And we aren't competing with other districts. Ladies and gentlemen, we are competing with commercial vendors. Who again, driver walked in this morning and said, I got a job at CTA. That's the company that provides tour groups over to the port from Disney. They're paying me $20 to walk in the door and $1,000 sign on. Bye. It's like, well, what are you gonna do for healthcare? Oh, we got the Affordable Health Care Act. Well, how about, we got this wonderful pension system, it's called FRS. I'm too young to worry about that right now. So I think what we're seeing out there is the group of workers coming in that are only caring about those zeros in that paycheck, and they're not really looking down the road. They know they can get affordable health care through other means, which didn't used to exist, because the big hook for districts was what? Great benefits, that wonderful pension, solid hours, you don't get laid off. You had that guarantee. That's kind of changed, and the workforce has changed in the way that they look at it. So I think we have to evolve as well, and we have to move in that direction to try to capture those individuals to come drive our school buses for us.
That's tremendous insight, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like, we need to get out of the frame of mind, well, we're gonna do 1865 now, or what. We really need to change the entire dynamics. It's obvious, just from what I've seen so far, I would speculate that you're doing as good of a job as you can using the same principles that we've been operating under for many years,
30 years, sir.
right?
Yes.
So now it's time to change these principles and kind of disrupt what we're doing so that we can actually find a way forward that is successful for the school district, right? I would imagine.
Absolutely.
So it'll be interesting to find out what that leads to, but I mean, I think that's where we need to be thinking now, right?
I would agree 100%.
Mr. Arguello, I've heard this period we're in right now referred to as the Great Resignation. And if you look at our history as a nation, every time we have a very significant event, it changes us slightly as a society. And if it changes us as a society, it also changes us as a workforce. You know, World War II, 9/11, the pandemic certainly has changed us. And some of the HR professionals I still associate with tell me, we don't have a labor shortage. What we have is a labor shift. People now choose not to do certain types of jobs. Primarily, they tend to be those jobs where they are exposed to a lot of other people. And during a pandemic, there's a lot of risk there. And school bus drivers are exposed to an awful lot of people. So you're absolutely right. The way we used to do things is not the solution anymore. So what we have to do is figure out what is that next thing? How do we respond to the shift in our workforce? And if I knew that, I would write a book and go on the speaking circuit.
Well, I really like your team so far because I think that, you know, usually you have the same conversation with anybody across any industry and they're like, no. Believe me, we've been doing this for 50 years. We're gonna stay the course. And, you know, I mean, the chief of the Titanic obviously had that same philosophy. So I commend you guys. I looking forward to what the next bright ideas are.
We're totally dedicated to the industry and the children that we serve every day, and we're always looking for ways that we can, you know, it's overused, but think outside that box.
Yeah.
We've got to do different because we keep getting the same results if we don't. You know, everybody knows what that is. So definition of insanity, right? But absolute dedication. Thank you, Mr. Beal. Mr. Sheriff?
So our issue is, the system was designed for homemakers to drive the bus. That's a total shift. And we need a new idea, but we also need the funds. We pay $13.80 to start with our contract we just passed. Well, they can go to work for Wawa for $13.80.
Oh, more than that.
Well, we haven't really had a homemaker type of society for 30 years. So, I mean, so 30 years ago, somebody should have said, hey, you know what? We need to change up now, you know, and so.
And that was my comment related to 1993 when I came into business, is that it hasn't changed, and it didn't change then. That was the year they changed the funding formula at the state, which actually encouraged efficiency instead of, prior to 1993, the more buses you had on the road, the more money you got from the state. And some very smart directors got together and said, wait a minute, I'm putting more kids on my buses, so I should get paid more for being better at what I do. And the state agreed. So we ended up with a brand new funding formula, which also hasn't been visited in 30 years. So that's another look that we need to do from within, through our state agencies and through DOE and Tallahassee.
Let's keep moving on here.
Yes, sir.
We've got
I'm done.
several
Thank
other
you.
people that.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Castillo.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Bass, Mr. Mendez.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being open to our questions. I know that we're asking a lot of things and we do have, I mean, I was here when the tiered system came out. That was one of the first things that I had to deal with. So it was, you know, something that we thought was going to help with the issues that we were having, and it did, but I feel like what we're doing is putting a lot of Band-Aids on a fire hose. And so my first question is, with regards to short-term solutions, and I'm not trying to tell you how to do your jobs because you are an expert in your field and I am not. But one of the things that you mentioned at the very beginning of this part of the conversation was that we have drivers who are technically getting paid for 6 hours, but but in reality, they're working a lot more than that, over twice as much as that, 12 to 15 hours, just because of the way that the schedule works. One of the things that I wonder if you have considered or if you have any opinions about is how to reduce those inefficiencies. So how do we make it so that there isn't that much time that they're actually working without technically being on the clock? I'm not sure if you have an answer for that yet. But I was curious about that because that seems to be one of the reasons why people don't wanna work here specifically. And then in general, as a larger conversation that I think the entire nation and clearly the entire world is having, is the industry is changing. So do we think that we're putting Band-Aids on a situation that needs to be completely uprooted? Have you had those conversations with your industry experts? We all have our own,
Yes, ma'am.
group of people that we talk about policy and whatever. I'm sure that you have some groups as well. What are we saying about the future of public transportation? Because we're not the only ones having this issue. And so if we're not the only ones having the issue and there's bright minds thinking about this and we still haven't solved it, what is the solution? And last, this is probably something that maybe we're not even ready to talk about, but I am curious. You did mention some of the districts that were more efficient and were having less of a challenge with recruiting, and some of those were privatized.
Correct.
Do you have any data on how they're doing this? What the how this is working in their districts? How they went about doing it? How the public has reacted? What the differences in service is. I'm curious. If you don't have that information now, it's fine, but I am curious to know about what the differences are and how that's more efficient.
Yes, ma'am. So let me.
In answer,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Castillo, one of the things you asked about is a topic that we deal in collective bargaining with, so
No,
some
talking
of
about
your
it.
stuff,
Okay.
Harvey, that you don't wanna talk about.
Oh,
you
that's
just
why
say,
you were
well,
looking
could
at
we have a-
Frank. Oh, he's like.
No, could we have a closed bargaining
Yeah.
session
Sure.
where
Sure.
I could talk about it?
And I'll be happy to address that at any point, but let me just say, just for the record, that every driver's paid for every hour that they work.
Okay.
What I was actually referring to is what their day looks like. And
No,
how
that's
long
what I
they're
meant. How do
awake.
we make it
Yes,
so
ma'am.
that they're not on site for
Right.
12 hours
Right.
or on call for 12 hours when they're really only here
Right.
for 6?
So they're, many drivers, some drivers only get to 6, some get 8, some get 9, depends
Yeah.
on what their routes look like. Some are up to 10, absolutely. With regard to the industry, absolutely. We have our own industry magazines, our own industry associations, everything from the fleet side through the operations side, Council of Great City Schools. We've got all these organizations. I belong to most of them. We do many conferences. Fortunately, the conferences are starting to come back, so we're actually going to be able to go out and meet with our peers again. And we're all got our heads together and we're all talking about that. And there is a complete agreement that driving as an industry has to be retooled. It
Yeah.
has to start this evolution. It has to morph back into something that meets the new society needs. The world has changed and we have it. We're still again operating like, somebody saw, we did a little news piece at noon and I'd said something about using public transit might be an option for us at some point. And somebody wrote in immediately on Let's Talk, and it was something about, yeah, back in 1950 and 60, they used all public buses. And
Yeah.
I said that was before there was a law that said yellow school buses have to be used.
Yeah.
So, those changes
So we
came
have
into
to
effect.
shift.
Last and certainly, your last question was,
I asked a lot of things. We talked about the industry. What is it?
Privatization.
Oh, yeah.
privatization, okay, yes, ma'am. So anecdotally, I can tell you, I've spoken with the directors of those 3 districts, and I actually, Martin County was privatized at one point, and then came back out of privatization, and then went back into into district owned and operated. Santa Rosa, the way the private companies do it, is they pay no benefits. There's no
Got it.
retirement, they offer 401k, so what they'll do is they'll come in and they'll take my $21 million budget, and they'll say, we'll do it for 19 million. And they'll give you this nice low ball, they'll get a nice 3-year contract. They take that $19 million, they pull out that piece that I said was $5 million in benefits. They take that out because they don't have to pay that now. They take out some other sundry things that they don't have to pay with regard to benefits. And they say, drivers, here's a $5 an hour raise. And the drivers go, yeah. And so the drivers all go to work for the private company, but once again, no retirement, no FRS, no fringe benefits to speak of. They're working basically for wages. That's the way the private companies do it.
But that's also, it just sounds like that's also the way that that's the industry demands, because you just made a point of saying that the new worker isn't worried about having the FRS or being
correct.
part of that.
Yes, ma'am.
So if that is what they're asking for, then maybe there's a conversation to be had there.
You're very, very correct, and I would absolutely agree. That's certainly something for discussion. New York, for instance, New York primarily is privatized for the entire state for all of their bus transportation. They use a combination of the trains, the subways, private buses that do these things. Let me think of some others. There are many private companies throughout the nation that provide private services. Laidlaw is one of the biggest. They run over 60,000 buses nationwide. Ryder is another one. They're School Transportation of America, which is based out of Canada. They run hundreds of thousands of buses across the nation. We in Florida run about 500,000 buses every year. So when we look at the 16,000 or so school districts across our nation, a large portion of them are privatized. There are some benefits to the district for privatization, but there's also a lot of fear
Sure,
in that districts still have the accountability,
of
but
course.
they don't have the control.
Mhm.
I know, for instance, my friend Leslie up in Duval, just before she retired, she used to say, Arby, she said, when a bus driver got up sick and they didn't want to go run their route, they just wouldn't go. And so those kids didn't make it to school. The parents would call the district and the district would say, well, wait a minute, let's check on Route 100. How come it didn't run today? They call the private bus firm and they'd say, well, the driver didn't feel good today, so she just didn't run the route. The penalty for not providing that service was less than it cost to drive that bus for that particular day. So
Got
the
it.
private company just took the penalty and said, sorry for parents, you gotta get your own way to school. I can't operate that way. I love these kids. We've got to get these kids to school. I feel that dedication to get them. We run buses no matter what. We are short 50 drivers right now, but every one of those buses is going to run every morning. And even if we're 30 minutes late to a bus stop, heaven forbid, I'm going to run. I'm going to get you. Stand there and wait. We're coming to get you. I promise you, every stop will be serviced every day. Private companies don't do that. They just don't show up. So
Right.
that's my experience over the lifetime of my career that I've seen and anecdotally talked to people. So,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Mr. Bass?
I'll try to be quick, because I know we're running a little late. I assume we put the less efficient buses on shorter routes. That's kind of a common, I would think you would.
Yes, sir, we do, and we also try to keep mostly spares,
I got you.
so.
Sarah, you and Randy, we're gonna be building 2 transportation facilities, and you've mentioned several times during the course of that it's gonna be a sizable savings to us once they're built. So we're making budget now, so it's gonna be a savings there. My question is, can we offer a sizable signing bonus, but then give them in 3 installments, annual installments, instead of giving them the signing bonus on their initial hiring? It's okay, this is how much we'll give you, and we'll spread it out over 3 years, to kind of give them a little bit of an incentive to stay, but make it sizable enough to where it would be enticing for them to stay. That way you don't have one, come and get their $500 or $1,000 and the next year they're gone. Is that doable? With the savings that we're going to be making, because the East Transportation Facility is going to be built, within 2 years? Is that what our
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed? So what kind of savings are we talking about? Are you anticipating with the new facility?
So
Dead
the primary savings is gonna be, cost avoidance is gonna be deadhead. We're currently at a Horizon loan, and these are numbers stuck in my head I didn't prepare, but somewhere around $375,000 a year alone, just running buses back and forth for service. That doesn't include all the other sundry things that go on. We have to move buses, or we have to do something, or we have to bring a bus over because we're operating out of a shed over there and we have to do an engine rebuild. So the deadhead is the primary thing, but please also remember that the east side is blossoming in homes. Eventually we'll have more schools out there, and that whole community is gonna build up. So now you're taking all that deadhead out and you're operating in the local areas, and that's where your savings actually come into. So right now we haven't forecast that, but we just know that that deadhead right now is the primary driver of that.
We have 2 facilities now. When we open 3, we would have to add some staff.
Absolutely.
So there's your saving, I got you.
I also might mention that in the medical community alone, my wife is a RNFA. She recently changed jobs. She went to work for Advent Health. They gave her a $10,000 sign-on bonus, but it was over 3 years. So each of the 3 years, she got a portion of that $10,000 instead of all up front.
So we don't do that?
So
Can we do something?
We can bargain any of that, yeah.
that can be bargained, but that's a common.
Okay.
That's a common
All right.
denominator.
Let's go.
I would ask the same thing too. I like where you're going now.
Yeah.
Don't forget.
But the bonuses aren't
Yeah.
sufficient that it would make any difference,
We've got
right?
400 drivers.
If you say $1,000 bonus, that's not gonna be enough,
It's
it's
gotta
about
be sizable.
$300 each, I mean, it's just.
But again, that's a negotiable item, so that's something that has to negotiate at the table,
Gotcha.
obviously.
Okay.
But you gotta think about the thoughts, the ideas are out there.
Yes, sir, I'm sorry, thank you.
And Linda?
Yeah, and related to staffing also, I happen to have a friend who's close, my friend of mine, but he's in Seminole County,
Yes.
not here local. And one thing that he mentioned that was big was having bus monitors. Because, sometimes he's driving, they don't want to be disciplining kids in the back at the same time. And sometimes having a physical person in the back helps, but can also be expensive. But I was thinking, you know what, now they got those cameras, I think Amazon sells them, I don't know which one, where they can speak. You know what I mean? So maybe we're thinking outside of the box. Maybe these cameras get loaded with, because we have to have cameras on, I think all of our buses have cameras anyway. So it's not like I have to rewire it, but just change it to a camera where they can speak, and then we have a monitor at the district monitoring more than one bus. So if we see little Johnny in the back jumping up and down, hey, Johnny, sit down. And that way the bus driver doesn't have to turn around and yell at the little kid that's there. And the reason why I say that is not just to say, hey, that's a cool idea, but I'm telling you right now, because some bus drivers have that sense of pride. But some of them, like he used to drive in Orange County in some of the scarier neighborhoods, and they didn't even want to do it, you know what I mean, because of the monitor situation. So you're right, it's not always just pure pay, but I think that's something that maybe this board can kind of give you guys a little guidance and say, look into something like that, where you have a camera system and then a person at the district, rather than having a monitor on every bus and costing us so much money, one person reviewing that and then helping enforce some of the discipline that happens in the back of the bus.
So a system like that's been available for about 15 years. There's a particular company that makes that system, and we actually did a pilot with it. Unfortunately, we couldn't get principals that wanted to sit down and watch buses go through their entire routes.
Right.
So it failed because there wasn't anyone to speak to the students. And the technology at the time was kind of young and early, and depending on where you're at, if you're way down in Keenanville and Yeehaw and down Canoe Creek, there's
No,
no
I'm talking-
cell service.
And I get it, but I'm talking about like district staff though, because there's a possibility, because their district is hiring monitors to physically get
Yes,
on
sir.
the bus. So we're not talking about the principal, you're right, if I'm a principal, I don't want to add it on job description either, because if you're not going to pay me more, I don't want more work.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's just natural human
Certainly.
talent, response. But I'm talking about just having a district monitor. So instead of hiring a monitor per bus, maybe we look at maybe a monitor per every 5 buses or something like that, that somebody kind of monitors, but it's at the district, they're at a control center,
Sure.
and they're just speaking in and not being an added responsibility of the principal
We
itself.
can certainly look at a pilot, because I know the technology's out there.
Okay, good.
Better yet, let the parents watch, let them
Oh,
give their
no.
own kids watch.
That's an interesting.
Good news?
Yeah, specifically for that, yeah.
It's great to keep moving. here.
Absolutely, so I think we left off with stringent license restrictions when we get individuals in to train them for their CDLs. It's 40 hours of classroom training. That's a state certified curriculum with state certified trainers that have to do that. We talked about the 10 hours behind the wheel, including they actually have to do some nighttime training, which is a new addition to the CDL portions. And also, please remember, CDLs are federally controlled. They're not locally state controlled. So when we talk about changes to a CDL licensure requirements, that's all at the federal DOT level. Physical requirements. Our bus drivers have to take a DOT Class 1 physical every year. Every 13 months, they have to worry about their health. They've got to be healthy. They've got to be safe on that school bus. You got to know they're not going to have a heart attack. They're going to have some problem out there, pass out, and then we've got a school bus load of kids doing 50 miles an hour down the road with nobody driving. So they have to do that as well. They also have to take a dexterity test. They physically have to be able to board the bus, get out of the seat, go to the back in an emergency, and be able to evacuate that bus and help evacuate that bus. So our drivers have to be physically fit and able to do the job. Again, we talked about the fact it's really a part-time job, with fairly low pay. We're at $13.80 with approval of the contract tonight. It's a very challenging job for drivers. The accountability is very, very high. Parents today don't believe a word you say on that school bus unless it's on video, and that's the only way they're going to believe it. And drivers have issues with that sometimes because they're very proud of what they do and they're proud of their kids and they want to feel respected. So that might be another issue that we'll perhaps talk about through the student discipline process, is that support from the schools is critical, support from this board is critical to make sure that drivers are empowered to do the things that they need to do, and make sure children respect their authority on that school bus so they behave. It's one thing to have 30 students in a classroom with a teacher with her back to, or his or her back to a board doing the lesson, as opposed to a school bus that maybe has 60 or 65 students back there, and the driver that can never look back because they've got to look down the road all the time. So I'm a big proponent of also having bus attendants to help with that driver and help with discipline on each and every bus if we possibly could. So how do we do our recruiting? We do it through job fairs. We have a couple of job fairs. We try to have a couple of job fairs every month. Our turnout's fairly low, 25 to 50 applicants. Of that, we might get 10 to 12 that actually start class. And of that, as of this morning, we had a class of 12, and I think we have 7 that we're testing currently. And we hope every one of them will stay, because I did have that one this morning. They got tested, drove the route, and then came in and said bye-bye. They got a different job coming. We're also reaching out to the college and tech schools and our Go Ed to say, hey, if you need a job, come see us. You know, we're hiring for sure. We're advertising everywhere. We've got job fairs, you know, out on the transportation website. We bring the newsletters. We use now hiring flyers. I'll tell you a quick funny story. So we went out to Publix, and we're going to put a big shiny bus out there, you know, and have some our really great drivers out there with big smiles and handing out flyers. Now hiring. Don't you want to come join our team? So I said, go in and talk to the Publix manager, make sure it's okay for us to be in the parking lot. So going in, got the Publix manager. He comes out. And they're talking, they're saying, yeah, this is really great. And they said, so would you mind at all if we hand out these flyers? He goes, oh no, hands it back to him. And they said, but why? He says, because for every person that you entice to come to work for you, I can't get them to come to work for me.
Right.
So we are in competition. This is a huge competition. He was as nice as he could be, but his point was, you can't steal labor away from me because I need my own. I need stockmen. I need custodians. I need cashiers. And for every one of them that works for you, and you're out here advertising in my parking lot, you're taking away my chance of hiring that individual as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. We're also exploring using Indeed, Monster.com, Transit Talent, some of the online services to help us get the word out there. Many districts use a lot of that, but it's mixed results. A lot of people will come and inquire. They'll sign up online and then they never show up, or they're really not interested in the job. We're meeting with human resources on a monthly basis, and one of the things that we try to look at is how we can streamline the entire hiring process. One of the things that we've done most recently is we've taken the fingerprinting, scheduling, and the drug testing schedule, and we've taken it over, so that we're now working directly instead of having having that process that we have to go through to go back through HR. And HR was very, very happy with that, and that was collaboration on our part to make that happen. We also have, you've probably seen those magnetic signs on the white fleet vehicles running around, says now hiring. So again, we continue to advertise everywhere that we possibly can. We've got some drivers that even take it to their church bulletins and put it in church and get the pastor to talk about, hey, we love our kids, we gotta get into school, come on folks, let's get out there and help them.
We take those magnets and put them on nicer cars.
Nicer cars. Share with me, nicer cars. We have.
Mr. Creech, before we move to the next page, Mr. Castillo's got
I'm sorry.
Thank
Okay.
you, Mr. Chair. So one thing that you mentioned earlier was that the industry was made for a stay-at-home parent, basically,
Correct,
And,
originally. Mhm.
and this stay-at-home parent would presumably be the bus driver. I see a lot of really amazing recruiting tools here. Have we tried the mom groups? Have we tried talking to moms specifically? Yes?
We have reached out to every parent group that
Okay.
we possibly could
Okay.
think of. Anytime we hear about a gathering or an organization, we have a community relations representative that will send out and try to get word out or get some flyers out. Even little cards that we hand out, now hiring, come see us. We're about to go to the Choice Fair. Now, this is a fair that's designed simply to get, the parents in to see what kind of choices they have in schools. We're gonna be right there as well, saying, hey.
I wonder if there might be again, I can talk about this all day.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm very interested and I don't wanna spend too much time on this, but I wonder if there is an opportunity to rebrand transportation workers to attract more of that stay-at-home parent that wants to have the time with their kids but still wants to make an income. That might be an idea. Maybe it's a rebranding opportunity.
Very possibly. And thank you for that. We'll take note of that and explore that idea.
Just don't let the county do the logo for you.
Absolutely.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Like if you can't, like a tagline, like if you can't get to school on time, you can't learn. And I mean,
That's
it's just
true.
something like that to kind of reemphasize the importance of it.
John, some of the drivers, real quick, when I was growing up, all the bus drivers took their buses home to avoid them
Right.
having, do we have some of the drivers that are allowed to take the
We
buses?
have two down in Keensville that actually do that. It's because they live down there. That's about a 57-mile one-way trip. So they come in the mornings one way, picking up the kids all the way up to New Creek. Then they stay here all day, and then go in the afternoon, they reverse and go back.
What about in our district, what,
In our
points
district,
in?
almost everything is compounded now. When I began my career in Polk County next door in 1993, every bus went home. There's pros and cons to that, and I can tell you.
I know, I can see both sides.
Absolutely. So, one of the cons is that you don't know the kids aren't being picked up because the driver didn't call in sick until somebody drives by and goes, Sally's bus is still sitting in her yard, it's 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And you go, oh my word, we didn't get the high schools, we didn't get the elementary schools, nobody told us. So,
Yeah.
there's some issues with that,
So many people in subdivisions and HOAs.
HOAs,
Well,
right.
right, I know.
Not everybody put a bus in here.
Right, there are definitely ordinance issues with dual wheels, so. We're continuing to increase our recruiting and opportunities and our CDL readiness. We're encouraging our non-CDL employees out there to become CDL drivers as much as we can. We're providing free study literature and free CDL permit testing, prior pre-instruction before the testing. One of the things that candidates have to do is take a test. And many of them just aren't prepared to do it, so we're tutoring them before they go and take that test to get their permit to become a CDL driver. And if they think, hey, I can't drive something that big, we'll take them out in the parking lot, put them in the bus, and let them drive around the parking lot. And I encourage each and every one of you to come out. I'll do the same thing for you, so you can see exactly what that looks like. Not you, Mr. Kreppenbach. No, go ahead, sir.
Have you seen my driving record?
And we also have a great informational recruitment video out there on our webpage. We again continue to conduct informal sessions with our interviews, when we do our interviews. Our staff assists anyone and everyone that might be a potential candidate to help them not only log on to Brass Ring and go through and fill out the entire application, but we're constantly helping them with anything and everything at the job fairs. And we're working with HR almost every day and every week to try to, again, help to try to streamline the whole thing. Some of the things that we would like to explore is, and again, it's negotiable, is a supplemental pay that perhaps the drivers could have on a monthly basis, and I think Mr. Arguello came up with that idea as well, so that they could withdraw that cash at any time that they needed to. It wasn't part of their regular salary. We would like to continue to pay for extraordinary performance. Mrs. Grabber has helped us with that. We're actually giving little incentives out to drivers right now who are helping us. For instance, if you're on your regular route and I call you up and say, hey, would you go split a portion of Sally's route? And they say, sure, we'll go do that. We give them $10.
And on
And
these
if the-
topics, these are bargaining topics, so I'd ask the board to listen and not respond on what you think. You'll do that in the closed session.
So, but we're trying to do some incentives for those who would otherwise were helping us for free, and we help them with some of that extraordinary performance incentives. We would like to talk about providing a supplement for hard-to-fill routes down the road sometime. Just ideas, again, that we're throwing out. Referral bonuses, already out there, $250 if you bring in someone, they stay there 90 days. Unfortunately, to date, since we put that back into effect at the beginning of the year, we've had 0. Nobody, unfortunately, brought us anybody. Perhaps staying bonuses. You get an extra bonus if you stay the whole year.
Yeah.
And signing bonuses, obviously, we discussed those briefly. We already waived the background check and physical costs. We pay for that already for our candidates, so again, not much money coming out of their pocket. We also want to continue with employer recognition. You know, we want to provide recognition for an annual bus operator monitor appreciation each and every year. There's an annual perfect attendance supplement that's already out there. You get $125 for perfect attendance every 9 weeks, so it's available every quarter for them, and that's progressive, so they can go through the entire year and get that money. And we will continue to recognize our outstanding bus drivers and monitors. And now with the new Safe Driver Plan, which was just ratified under a new CBA, our collective bargaining agreement, we're going to be giving out safe driver certificates and pins. So again, another part of recognition for them. We continue to strive to improve our communications with our customers, and that means we're talking to our school staff every day. We're contacting parents and guardians every day. We try to talk to parents before bad things happen on the bus, and certainly after issues on the bus. And again, that's in collaboration with our schools, and the schools are treating us very well and have been very, very supportive. We need to look at our absenteeism policy. Again, this is a part of our contract, but some districts have very stringent absenteeism policies. Our absenteeism runs somewhere between 15 and 20% on a daily basis. So on top of the 40 or 50 bus drivers that were short, now we've got people that aren't coming to work. Life happens, we understand that, but there are those who sometimes take advantage of that and our goodwill. We're exploring a potential partnership with Links, and we've had a couple of recent calls with Ms. Tiffany Hawkins to determine how we can best support that. One of the things right now is we're trying to do some data mining for our longitude and latitude of the students and where they live, to overlay on their map to see if their routes could somehow supplement our routes. And that's a work in progress now, and we hope to continue to do that work. I know that Mr. Wheeler is deep into that for us as well. And we hope that at least, even if we got a few that were out there using public transportation, that would help the bus situation dramatically. Just know that West Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, Broward County use Tri-Rail bus services and to do the same thing that we're attempting to do. So it's doable. The state does support it at certain levels. And it is one of those options that you can take the caveats from the Florida statute that says you have to use yellow school buses. We could also consider adding student bus passes to help out. So even if it was within 2 miles, it might cut down on some of the cars that are visiting our schools. We are continuing to explore part-time staff. Maybe you've got a firefighter, maybe you've got a police officer, maybe you've got a corrections officer that might be able to work in the AM and not the PM. So we're reaching out to see if that's an option for us as well. So we're trying to shake every bush that we possibly can. And with that, more questions.
And this isn't a question, but I don't want to spend too much time on the regular board meeting. This is regarding the safe driver plan.
Yes, sir.
I had met with maintenance, and I know the school bus operators get a $200 safe driver incentives at the end of each 12-month period.
Yes, sir.
And I guess all of the people who drive this vehicles, maintenance vehicles, should be extended that same opportunity. So I checked into it, and they are provided that, but the wording on this doesn't say that. So if you could at least have someone reword it, because it says, quote, school bus operators will receive $200 safe driver incentives at the end of each. If we could expand that, school bus operators and those who drive, the employees who are required to drive an SDOC vehicle as part of their regular daily job duties will receive the same recognition.
Bargaining issue. Let's talk about it in bargaining. Yes, you can't change salaries without bargaining.
No, I thought it's
Can't
already
change
been,
the
it's already
incentives
been
without
approved. This is just a,
Mr. Terry, you said it was in the Teamsters contract so that all the Teamsters employees qualified.
That is the safe driver plan, but it's not extended to the White Fleet driver. It's only for school bus drivers. We would have to change that plan and bargain.
Okay, then I misunderstood Mr. Bass. I thought you said it was everybody in the Teamsters contract was covered.
okay, well then my
By the
apologies,
way, that's
sir.
right.
I thought it was, that's what I was
That's my
thinking.
mistake.
Okay,
So Mr. Brummelmeyer, you said we could have a bargaining negotiation meeting for this,
Yes, you can.
for Teamsters at any time, right? As a board, so we can discuss any options. So maybe we should get one of those.
Yeah, I'd have Randy and Orby there, Chris.
Yeah. Okay, good. Mr. Melendez?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for an excellent presentation. You guys really did your homework and very forthright with what the issue was. And I also like the fact that there's a lot of out-of-the-box thinking in there, because the reality is, I was on the board back in 2008 and we always had transportation issues. So the fact that we're trying to look under every rock and to do something about it is important. But one thing that I've read recently with some folks, it's not exactly related to the staffing issue. It's about, and I just want to know what it is. Like some neighborhoods, is the bus, like especially with HOAs, are the buses allowed to get in there, or do we? And I'm not trying to change it. I just want to know what it is, and because I want to dispel that rumor, because some people feel like, okay, the buses aren't going deep into a neighborhood to pick up somebody. I want to know that is there state statutes or policy preventing us to get in there, or the HOAs are telling us they don't want us in there?
So that's a multifaceted question, but just the short answer is that we primarily design bus routes so they service the communities in a sort of an arterial fashion. Gated communities, we do not enter without a contract with the HOA, because if we damage something, or there's some HOAs don't want us in there at all. They have very pristine, they have streets, they have very low hanging trees, they'd have to trim the trees back. That vehicle is 10 feet tall, it needs about 13 feet of clearance. There are just many problems with entering some of the smaller, I would say more modern neighborhoods that have smaller streets. So you start to get into these neighborhoods, you've got utility vehicles parked on the side of the road, you've got lawn care. A bus cannot maneuver through those. So
People parking on the side of the roads.
So we try to stay out of a lot of those neighborhoods. and bring the children out as an arterial style stop, rather than try to snake our way through those neighborhoods. But again, the gated communities, it is private property, so we do have to ask permission. And actually, our purchasing department manages those contracts for us, and they actually have to go through the legal process, and everybody has to agree, and it all has to be signed.
Because I can also imagine too, like in some subdivisions, especially in certain areas, and like in Poinciana area, if you turn left at that thing, you're not getting out of there, because
That's
nobody's
correct.
gonna let you get in, because there's no traffic light, so you're gonna be stuck there for like 20 minutes.
That is
'Cause
absolutely
people know there's a bus,
Yes.
they jump in front of the bus on purpose, just to not let to avoid getting behind it, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Nobody wants to be behind those big ugly yellow things, and they will absolutely do crazy things to get in front of it.
Right,
That's true.
and then my last question along that line is, if we know that future subdivisions like Kindred and Toho, well, they're not really future anymore, they've already designed. But I was thinking that, on some of these subdivisions, what if we can suggest to the county to have kind of like, you know, those little bus, kind of like a bus stop
Yes, sir.
almost in the
A
front,
turnout.
you know what I mean? Like, you know, right before you go in there, like maybe the
Yes, sir.
lane kind of turns, maybe they can have a bench, and Links can use it too, you know what I mean? So it's not just for us. But, you know, I just think that, I don't know if that's something that the district may want to pursue, to do like a resolution to the county later, or something like that. And that way, because if those are going to be bus stop areas, that way it doesn't just stop right in the middle of the road, it could kind of pull off. And then there could be like a little bench, little covered area for the weather and things like that, you know, mini bus stations in front of these big subdivisions.
So there's two things with that. One is that concept actually works, and it's used in a lot of major cities. Orlando invokes a lot of that, but you've got to be off the main thoroughfare to do that. When you pull that bus off the side of the road and it's not on the main roadway anymore, those red stop signs don't work anymore. It's illegal. You have to be on the primary main road surface to run those red lights and to create that stop sign situation, so you can't pass that bus. So if you're gonna pull off like that, stop signs have to stay inside, and you have to make sure the students are sequestered on the outboard side so that they're safe
But
coming
you
in.
could have the bus stop
You can have a bus stop.
parallel to the road and
Parallel
park
to
on
the
the road and the kids just come from that
Right,
stop.
but you can't
But
run
you
the
can't
stop
pull
signs
off.
unless you're on the primary road, because that's the way the law is written.
Right, but they can still have like a
Absolutely.
stop with the car,
In
but you
Orlando-
can't pull off.
Yes, sir. Orlando does that in a lot of places, and some of the bigger neighborhoods, especially in the north end of Orlando, they have you come in, there's a roundabout of sorts, and they built a special area just for the loading of the students. And it's really unique, and it's very practical and works very well, keeps the kids safe.
Yeah, then I guess maybe if you guys can come up with some ideas, and maybe at the next board workshop, again, that may be like a resolution to the county, but just something, because I'm just hearing that as a more frequent thing that's happening. And so it looks like the board can sit there and say, hey, even though we don't have the final say on it, but at least we're trying to contribute to that
Yes, sir.
as much as possible.
Be happy to help out.
And we have so many new developments happening now anyway,
Absolutely.
now's the perfect time to do it.
Now's the time to do it. Yes, sir.
I mean, does the rest of the board agree with that? I don't want to just give my direction on that.
Any more questions?
No questions, but just want to comment, thank you for all that you do, because I know what you do is probably one of the most challenging arenas in this district, but thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, thank you for putting this
Yeah.
together, very well done.
Absolutely.
Good job.
Thank you.
Very informative, I appreciate it.
We have an incredible team. They get all the credit, they do all the hard work, we just rubber stamp everything. No, just kidding.
All right,
We are recognizing
That's not
Medical
good for you.
Assistance Week, and so I believe some of our medical assistants may be out in the lobby in
Yeah.
case anybody wanted to have their blood pressures.
Oh, well, yeah, this is
With
a
that,
good
we
time to do
will
that.
adjourn.
Maybe after the meeting.
Do it
Good
now.
job, guys, thank you. Yeah, just to see what the difference is, right? Oh, my goodness. John?
Yeah, sure. It's in my office. Yeah.
You want me to come back there, or do you want me to?
I'll come right up.